Hello, and thank you for listening. Before we dive into today's exciting episode, I have a small request. If you're enjoying the Book and Lounge podcast, please take a moment to subscribe. Your support helps us to continue to bring you engaging discussions on your favorite books. In this episode, I'm joined by Concia Alicia to discuss her new book, Made from This. Concia is a Black British author of Montserratian origin, a public servant, and an elected councillor. Her work navigates the intersection of community, legacy, and what it means to build something that lasts. She's the author of two children's books, Sasha's Special Nose and The Mighty Good Mix. Made from This is her debut adult novella published in 2026. Let's dive into the conversation. Thank you so much, Concia, for joining us to have a conversation about your most recently published book, Made from This.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with a set of just quick fire questions so that listeners can get to know you a little bit better.
Okay, let's go.
So first one, so with the current hot weather, which one would you go to cool down? Would it be an ice cream or ice lollies?
Ice cream.
Ice cream, okay.
Yes.
And what's your morning routine?
I don't have a routine because every day it's slightly different. My roles mean that my mornings look very different every day. Some days I could be getting ready to go to ratings, or I could be getting ready to see a resident, or I could be getting up and thinking about my book. It flows depending on what's on the agenda.
Oh, that's actually quite exciting because then you never know what's coming, and not every single day is the same.
That is very true.
If you had to erase something from your memory, what would it be?
It would be when I nearly drowned as a child.
Oh, no.
Going into the sea and slipping on a rock and going quite far out. I would love to erase that.
You made it.
Yeah, I'm here.
And we're grateful for that.
Yes.
Just moving on to your writing and your publishing. So I just want to first of all start by discussing your latest book. It's a novella, and it's your first title that you've written for adults.
Yes, as a novella, yes, that's correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and it's set in London and Montserrat.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Can you just tell us briefly about the book, and then maybe just read an extract from it so we can get a flavor of what it's about?
Yeah. So Made from This, which is just behind me there, is a book about legacy. It's a book about belonging. For me, the main thing about this book is we all have stories and we often tell ourselves stories. And through those stories, we have families, we have connections. And you find that there are times that the stories are different, depends on who's telling that story. In Made from This, you realize that because of the story that came before yours was influenced, and the influence of that story has an impact on your life. And what you then pass on will have an impact if you don't stop and think about it. Hence me saying a story instead of being, sort of making a decision whether good or bad stories. Whatever we have around us, we are shaped by the people who we know, whether we want to acknowledge that or not. And what does that look like as we move forward?
Mm-hmm. And do you want to just read a little bit from the book and give us a flavor of what it's about?
So I'm going to start with chapter 1. This introduces Simone, and I'm going to introduce this one because I think that this tells you a lot about the book. Okay, so the first thing you should know about me is that I am a counsellor who spent 20 years helping other people understand their childhoods before I was brave enough to sit with my own. I am good at my job. I know how to hold a silence without filling it. I know how to ask the questions that opens the door a person has been leaning against their whole life. I know that most of what breaks us happened before we had the language to name it. I know all of this the way you know a map of a country you have never visited, thoroughly and from a safe distance. My name is Simone. I am 43 years old. I live in a flat in South London with a man I love unevenly and 2 boys who frighten me with how much I need them to be okay. Most mornings, I wake up before my alarm and lie in the grey quiet and think about Montserrat. Though I have not called it home for more than 2 decades, I think about a man sitting in a plastic chair with a guitar across his lap, singing to his daughters, his face open and loose in a way I only ever saw when he thought no one was watching. I was always watching. His name was Clifton. He was not my father. I want to be careful here at the beginning of things because I have learned that the stories we tell about the people who hurt us have a way of flattening them. A man becomes a monster, a woman becomes a saint, and then the story is tidy and small, and it explains nothing, which is the opposite of what I need. What I need, what I have always needed, is to understand, not to forgive, not necessarily, though that word will come up, and you are welcome to decide for yourself what to do with it. But to understand, to follow the thread backwards and see where it began before it reached me. That's the first extract.
I'm glad you started with the first chapter and with reading, introducing us to Simone. So what I found as I was reading the book is that Simone does a lot of analysis. Every time she talks about a scenario or talks about somebody else in the book, she then analyzes the situation and then goes back to the story. But there's always some sort of analysis. I just wondered why did you choose to write it that way?
So Simone is a reflection of me to some degree. Whenever I am discussing a subject, I often analyze and I will give you a wide answer rather than a sort of sharp, quick answer. So I'm just thinking throughout this conversation, I'll try my best not to do that, but that is naturally who I am. And I guess the book comes through, it all comes through in the book. It comes through because, if you give me a subject, if you say, oh, Concia, what do you think about the horse that's in the stable? I will begin to say, well, the horse looks brown and it's moving in a particular way. And because of that, we must consider what's happening with the ground. And it's just naturally the way that I speak. So I think that's quite interesting that you have then picked up on that as the way that I have written, because that's clear about, my writing style and just who I am. And I tried really hard not to be fully me, but I think that's hard because you are the author, right? You're putting you in there, whether you want to or not.
So that's actually quite interesting. So who were you then writing the book for?
That's a big question. The book, I feel, transcends beyond my own friends and family. I feel like this book is for everybody because everyone comes from somewhere, right? Whether you are from the same culture or a different culture, we all have a tie, whether you are adopted or birthed, whatever it is. And we all have history and a story. We're all connected to something or to someone. So in a sense, this book is for everyone, whilst at the same time, when I'm going to go micro, I believe that the stories, particularly of people from Black communities, specifically Africa and the Caribbean, are very, very similar to some degree. And because of our history, we have some trauma behind that. And not only do we have that trauma, we then do not have some of the interventions that some parts of Western society had many years ago. So you would find that there are people who haven't had things like counselling, and still even today, things like counselling are a taboo in some parts. It's changed a lot, and I do feel like that's a wonderful thing. So people who may not traditionally go to counselling may read a book like this and realise, maybe this is the beginning to something. Maybe I want to start thinking about some of these things. I feel like it's an opener to a conversation that you may not ordinarily have, and especially so amongst people from Africa and the Caribbean.
So for me, I would say that the thing that came through the most was that this is a book about how we deal with trauma. So if I look at characters like Calvin and Iris and how they both reacted and how we let that trauma define us, and then how then, because of how it's defined us, it then affects how we either bring up or relate to the people who come after us or who are around us. So, for example, how Declan handles situations compared to how Simone deals with situations completely different because of, what they've gone through. And also, as you said, with the counseling, the amount of work that they put in to try and undo that trauma. So that does come through really strongly. But you mentioned about the trauma that people from Afro-Caribbean diaspora we carry with us. How do you think we break the cycle? Do you see this book as offering some form of therapy to people who've been traumatized or neglected, like the characters in the book?
An easy answer is yes, I do. I see it as an open door. As I started to say, it's not ordinary. The men, especially, let's be real about this. The men, especially, may not want to go to counselling, and this book gives that open door of the reasons why you should, why you may want to consider something like counselling, to begin to think a bit deeper about some of the things that you have been through. Not necessarily so that you can sit and wallow in your pain, but more so to understand yourself and to be deliberate about what you might want to pass on. Because whether we like it or not, I think one of the things the book does well is say we will pass on something. So you're better off taking control of that something and having a look and just taking control of what that looks like. What is it that you want to pass on? What's the shape of that? I think that for me is the main message that I would like for the men especially to hear, because throughout this book, I'm sure you've picked up that theme, that the women are somehow getting through, they're getting along. Simone especially has spent her life thinking, though she wasn't focusing on her own story, whereas the men were sort of bumbling through life. And when you see what happens with Declan as he enters the therapy room, and then you watch him transcend. Is beautiful the right word? I think beautiful is the right word. And you now know that he's now deliberately thinking about what he gives to his children and the way that his partnership feels with Simone. That will have an impact on his life as well as hers.
I'll admit that I did struggle initially to have any empathy for the characters. And I think part of it is because they're so, I don't know if damaged is the right word, but because they're carrying so much, they come across sometimes as quite cold and people that you really can't relate to. But I developed a liking for Declan and a lot of empathy for him as the book progressed, and I could see how he developed as a character. So I wanted to ask you, who would you say is your favorite character and why?
Yeah, it is Declan. Declan's my favorite character because he went on the longest journey throughout the book. He started off, I just said, quite cold and dismissive and not being able to see what was in front of him. But because of his love for Simone and him wanting to be the best dad that he can be, he deliberately took the steps to grow. So Declan is my favorite character.
I'm glad to hear that, because he was my favorite character as well. So if you could read maybe a second extract, then I want to come and ask you about Calvin, because I thought he was quite an interesting character.
Okay, good. So I am going to read something from the porridge scene. I was 6 years old the first time Clifton looked at me, as though I was exactly what he needed. I have thought about that day more than I have thought about most things in my life. I have thought about it because it was the day I learned something that took me the next 37 years to unlearn. I learned that being what someone needs is the fastest route to being seen. And I learned that the cost of that route is something that you discover only later, usually in a hospital, sometimes in a therapist's chair, always in the quiet of a night when you are being honest with yourself about the choices you have made. The day started with a smell. Clifton was among his many qualities and contradictions, an experimental cook, not in the way of a man who has studied food or developed a palate from exposure and travel, in the way of a man who has complete confidence in his own intelligence and sees no reason why that intelligence should not extend to the kitchen, to science, to engineering, to any domain he decides to enter on a given morning. He had put his island on the electric grid. A pot of porridge was not going to defeat him. What he had decided to make that morning was a porridge made from flour, not oats, not cornmeal, flour. Vera looked at the pot. She then looked at Clifton. Then she looked at the pot again. She said, I will not be eating that, and the children should not be eating it either. That is not something their stomachs are made for. Yeah, that's a bit from the porridge scene.
I like the porridge scene. I thought it was quite sad, but incredibly funny at the same time. Did want to come to Calvin. Calvin was a very complicated character. On the one hand, he's really this really successful guy who pulled himself up from very difficult circumstances and achieved a great deal. But at the same time, he was a very closed book. He struggles to say how he feels about things. So, like, with the relationship with Simone, although I could see that, he cares for her, but he just doesn't show it. And I just wonder, from your experience, do you think that that's as a result of their upbringing, how they've been brought up, or is it more the trauma? And also, do you feel that with our generation and the generation that follows us, have we broken that cycle, or are we still perpetuating the same thing?
I'm going to say both. That's the first thing I'm going to say. I'm going to say the answer to that question is both. Because Clifton, so success, right? What is success? In his eyes, success is material. Success is infrastructure. Success is about what you look like. Whilst throughout the book, I also had the thing of, he saw what he did for Simone to some degree as duty. I wouldn't say cared for, which is the word you used. I would say duty. So you perform some of the duties, which is she's got a house to live in, she has food, and that's it. And I'm going back to both, because there we are at the point of these people who, generation before us, they had trauma. They carried the trauma because no one processed. They were never given the opportunity to process. The language that we use today, they didn't have that language. So to some degree, we are privileged in order to think in the way that we do. I'm sure there were some people who do, and who were able to navigate life and kind of have a bit more of that deep emotional intelligence, because that's a part of it. And that part of the world as well, the definition of success created both pride in place, pride in person, and that pride comes through in sort of before a fall. I have a Christian background, and for me, that thing of pride comes before a fall. And the way that they speak take away from what they may feel inside. It's like they're sewn up, as you described. They're so sewn up that what they want to say doesn't come out. Instead, what comes out is ego, and then ego that's so inflated and so big that it damages all the relationships that they have. And for us today, we have the language. We have social media who has been able to bring some of that language in. So my hope is some of the things that was there previously is changing because of that. And counseling is becoming less of a taboo. And that in itself will help. And I think women generally, we are always on a journey of seeking betterment, but betterment emotionally, not just our things like our finances and our house. We want to emotionally be as well as possible. And I'm not sure if all men are on that same journey in the same way. And that does make it more difficult. So yes, I think some of that still remains today, whilst recognizing that the opportunities that people have and the access that they have does allow them to make some different choices.
And I'm glad you highlighted the difference between men and women, because I think women tend to talk a lot more, right? And at least with each other, or at least talk about their problems. I'm from an African background, and I do know that we're still not processing. We're still not accepting that we have been traumatized. And also, if you go to therapy or to a counselor, it's still stigmatized. So we don't seek help.
And I would say it's exactly the same in the Caribbean community. They mirror each other in that sense.
Which is a shame, because as you have said, we need to work on ourselves and get rid of that trauma and stop passing it down the generations. I also wanted to just touch on the women. So you have Vera and you have Celestine. I wonder if you could just tell us a bit about them.
So I'll start with Vera. So Vera is the mother of Simone, and Vera, I think, has her own complications, right? She had her first child very young, and practically, she's meeting Clifton, who appears to be a knight in shining armor. Not only does he show her all of the trappings of what a good life could be, he sort of tries to show that he's there for her. And what I loved is Vera watched life as it went on. She didn't just accept everything that came before her. She didn't just say, okay, the way that Clifton treats me is all right. I will keep going. And then she got to a point in life where she said, no, this is not enough for me. Emotionally, he's not meeting my needs. And she was able to move away from that situation and to find what she wanted, what she needed, and to genuinely flourish. And seeing Vera flourish was something that made me smile as I got towards the end of that book and developed that character. And Celestine, the opposite of Vera. Celestine worked hard. That woman gave everything that she had for that man to see her. She would be in the fields plowing and thinking, if I do this, he will love me more. And he never did. He took everything that she gave to him for granted. And the impact that had on Declan is one of the reasons you think this is why people need therapy. Because Declan was later able to see some of the damage, but it took him such a long time to both process the damage and to see it. And that's because his mother, who's clearly a loving woman who only wants the best for her son, and believing that she was providing that whilst being in a situation that was not serving her or her child in any way that was good. And that's real. The reality of that. This is life today for some people. And I wanted to bring light to it, but in a realistic way. I felt like throughout my book, I tried not to go over the top. I thought about stories that I've heard and developed the characters in a way that were true to their setting and true to where they who they were and who they wanted to be, and true to what was to come.
I liked how you contrasted the two characters. They both have their own challenges, but they approach them in very different ways. I like how you did that. Now you've written the book in first person narrative. When I was reading it, sometimes it felt like I was reading a poem. So I just wondered, do you always write in first person narrative? And also, why did you choose to write it the way you've written it? Because you only have very short sentences. And then there's also that repetition.
So to some degree, it felt like a counsellor was writing diaries. So that's what that was about. In a sense, it felt like a diary being written, and I wanted people to read it as like viewing in to their life rather than them telling them the story. That was important to me. And it was kind of getting that link in the way that a counsellor might tell you something in a therapy session. So it's getting that therapy bit across whilst telling your story.
And the first person narrative, is that your favorite?
I'm writing my second book, and I would say it is first person, but you've got a lot more quotes throughout that book, whereas this book didn't have lots of quotes. It was telling the story. I guess it's jumping between third and first. This book made from this, it jumps between both, whereas my current book is full on first person narrative. And I feel like one of them immerses you in the book, whilst the other one gives you a view into the book. And I would say for Made From This, I wanted more of a view because I didn't want people to feel so immersed that they were distant from the characters.
I normally struggle with first person because, first of all, I normally question the reliability of the narrator. But secondly, I I guess because I kind of want to know the story and want to know what's happening with the other characters. Like when Simone was analyzing, I was like, "Stop, Simone! Tell me what happened with Declan. Tell me what happened with Calvin." So, as I said, for me, that's just a preference. But I can see why it's effective, especially as you said, if you're writing it from a therapist's perspective and you're writing it as a journal entry, I can see why writing it this way is effective. Now you've also written 2 children's books, Sasha's Passion Nose and A Mighty Good Mix.
That's right, yes.
So I just wanted to ask, how did writing the novella compare to writing for children? And which one did you enjoy more?
Okay, totally different experiences. So the children's books, I felt at first, oh, these are going to be quick, and I'm going to, get that value across. But the children's book are completely values based, nothing else. That I felt like I was repeating similar conversations with friends, and I wanted to tell them in a story, to have a tool, to give them a tool that they could use in the future. And any other friends who asked similar questions, there was a tool that they had for one that's a story. The novella was much more intense, and I had to try to step out of the story a lot, and I had to try and breathe sometimes, because I was trying to separate myself from the story often throughout the book. And that's probably the big difference between the two. The children, I felt like this was an educational tool whilst being a story, whereas the other one did not feel that way. The novella didn't feel that way at all. It felt like I was inside of a story, telling a story the whole time. And emotionally, I got quite emotional, I would say, at times, writing that novella. I had to stop at times and think about those emotions, because some of those emotions are my own emotions, things I have experienced, things that I've felt, and things that I know to be true, not only for myself, but for friends as well, and family. And it could be sad, but there are places that's happy, because I deliberately tried to infuse hope throughout that book and not only write a sad story. So I will say it's not a sad story, it's not a happy story. It's complex. It's complex, and human beings are complex. And hopefully I was able to do that through the novella.
I didn't find it sad. I mean, there are elements that are sad. I felt that it just reflected life as we live it. So it's very realistic.
Good. And do you feel, if you don't mind, I'll ask you a question. Do you feel like in the book that there is that therapy element, and that if someone reads it, they could pick up on the sort of therapeutic themes for themselves? Does it help? Did you feel reflective at all, whatever element of your life, when you read it?
I identified with the characters and recognized what the characters are going through, and then thought to myself, well, if I was still going through the situations, I could see why I would need to get therapy. The one character whose experiences touched me the most was Calvin. That was such a sad experience, and because I've gone through something similar myself, so I totally saw why, I understood why he turned out the way he did.
Right.
And understood the need to have therapy, and because I went through that same experience, I had to have therapy to deal with what I went through. So yeah, I can totally see why, if someone picked this up, can see it as therapeutic, or at least as something that would then spur them on to go and get that help and to do the work that they need to have done. To become wholesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I did want to ask you about the writing process. So how do you actually write? Do you write and then have it edited, reviewed, proofread, and then come back to it? Do you have a team that you work with? I just wanted to know how it all works.
I did it mostly on my own. And when I'm writing, I've been writing this book for years. So maybe I'll start off by saying I've been writing for about 20 years. What I have not always done is publish. So the confidence to publish came more recently, and it came from understanding that the stories I was carrying deserved to be out in the world rather than sitting in my drawer, I'd say, or in my notebook, the different places I keep them. And this book in particular, Made From This, came from a question I had been carrying for most of my life. Why do people become the way that they are? And what does that cost the people who love them? And I feel like, a long time in working in public service and in health and in community, just sitting with the complexity of living. So the process for me was around fitting in everything that I did over the many years and writing a bit. And then I sometimes ask friends, I was like, oh, you read a little bit of something I've written? And sometimes people say yes, and then they'll give me their feedback. But more recently, I thought, I can't just have this book that I've been working on for such a long time do nothing. I need to do something with it. So I looked into the publishing processes, and I knew from doing the children's books that the traditional publishing route was not going to work for me, hence going down the self-publishing route, because I did not want to wait 2 years and have lots of rejections throughout the process. So again, as I was writing, I was thinking about things like that, like where will I put the book? How will I get there? There's no sort of continuity for me. I was writing and stopping around kids, around work, whenever I had time. It was, in a sense, it was my therapy to some degree, to stop in between the gaps in life and write and continue. I developed the characters before I wrote, of course, they were all developed. I added bits, I think, as I went on, but mostly they were developed because the idea itself had been sitting in me for a really long time.
And you said it was sort of like a therapy for you. Do you feel that it answered questions for you?
Oh, yes, it did. And to be fully transparent, I myself had therapy over a long time, over 10 years. And I know what that process is like in reality. So being able to bring that into a book has been really helpful. So because I'm a reflective person, because I'm an analytical person generally anyway, my way of being able to share my own feelings to myself is to analyze them. Instead of recounting verbatim in my head that story, I always ask myself, why do I think that happened? What's going to happen next? How do I move forward? So yes, it was my own therapy, looking at some of my own childhood issues, as well as some of the things that I went through as an adult.
You said you're very analytical. And how do your family and friends feel about you analyzing constantly?
My friends, I'll start with my family. My family they're over me, is the nicest way to put it. They're over me. They're always like, please, no more, no more. And I try not to have conversations of real depth because of this, because I naturally will move into that territory. Whereas I have a group of friends I've had for so many years who are similar and who speak in this way as well. And I guess we bounce off each other, and it's light. It's amazing when we do have conversations. So friends, great. Family, no, they're over me.
Well, at least you have, your friends who accept you for who you are,
Yeah.
which again also I thought was a theme that was reflected in this book, being able to accept people for who they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is such a good thing you've picked up on that. So when I think of my children's books and this, and even what I'm writing now, they all have the same theme. It's being able to accept people for who they are and what they become. So there's a theme around belonging. As I was asking myself, what is the thing that glues everything I've done together? And it's belonging. It's valuing people. It's looking at who they are beyond the surface. Yeah, that means a lot to me. My degree, by the way, is in social policy and sociology. So this is not new. I'm a real sort of observer of people and place, and I love it. I enjoy it a lot. So I bring that into everything that I do.
That does come across in the book, definitely. For one more question on the publishing process.
Mm-hmm.
So we have listeners who like to write. Let's say one of them's disgruntled with the traditional publishing route and want to self-publish. First of all, what's the process for actually getting self-published? And then secondly, what advice would you give to them?
Okay. Can I answer your questions possibly the other way around?
Sure.
So I'm going to start off by being a Black writer. I think it's different for Black writers and everyone else. So the challenges are real, and I don't want to minimize them. There's still gatekeeping problems in publishing. The stories that get told, the voices that get amplified, the books that get the marketing budgets, and the review coverage, these still do not reflect the full breadth of who is writing and who is reading. There's also a particular challenge that I think Black writers face, which is the expectation that we will write about trauma in a certain way, that our stories will be either celebratory or suffering with not much room in between. Made from This refuses that, and it's complicated, right? It holds damage and love in the same breath without resolving them into something tidier, and that is not always an easy sell. So I think I want to start there as an opener. The self-publishing route, you've got to be both a marketer and a good marketer, and also a writer. So being able to write a good book and no one hearing about your book or seeing your book is it's soul crushing. And now I knew this was going to be difficult, self-publishing, but recognizing that what's happening in the other side of publishing, I knew that I had to do it this way. So I would say to people, write. If you have a story to tell, write that story. There's nothing like getting that out and seeing it in print. And it possibly will do something for you inside. You're not going to carry that around. I believe a lot in purpose, and that people have a purpose. And if you believe that yourself, I think it's definitely worth exploring what that purpose is, and to not just let that sit down. It's so easy to not write the book. And if you're writing it for you and you're not that worried about what you're going to make from the book, go ahead. And I wrote my book not thinking that everyone will flock to it. Of course, it's a hope. You want people to find out about your book. You want them to read your book. You want them to think it's interesting. But first of all, writing is a hard process. It's a lonely process. And because of those things, you want to know if you're doing this for you, first of all. Yeah.
Yeah, that's such an encouraging message, and I absolutely agree with everything you said about the traditional publishing industry and the gatekeeping and the way it affects predominantly Black people. I mean, I think I read an article just early this month saying actually it's now even going backwards. At some point, at least Black people were being published, but now the numbers have even dwindled so much that they're actually going backwards. It is sad, because you are right. Our stories deserve to be read. Our stories deserve to be told.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that, people like you actually are brave enough to go out there and say, forget the traditional publishing industry. We are going to do this, and we are going to do this ourselves and put out our stories. So I'm really, really proud of people like you who do that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm really pleased to hear that. And I think what's also good is places like KDP does allow us to have access to that global market. You couldn't do this 10 years ago, right? And now that we have access to a global market, we should use it and support each other along the journey as well. And I think I may have read the similar article to you, because it spoke up. I said in the list, I think of the one most well-known publishers recently, that 1,000, only 4 of them were Black. I thought, wow, all my instincts were right about not chasing traditional publishers. And I looked at things like agents and the fees and how they change your book. And there was someone recently there's a film coming out, what's it called, Blood and Bones, and how mad she was about how much liberty they took over changing her book. And yeah.
Is that why it's taken so long to come out? Because they talked about that film for ages.
That's right.
That's why. Okay, now I understand.
Yeah. And the main reason is central to her book was this character who was a dark-skinned Black woman. And they have given the role to someone who's not a dark-skinned Black woman. And she's like, I'm not going to watch the film. I'm not going to engage with this. But of course, she sold the rights. But the whole foundation of her book, if you read it, is about the girl being dark-skinned. That was really important to her. So there's just so much that can happen. And you know, even things like your book cover, you want to have an input. And you do get an input in traditional publishing, but if they decide that that's not what they want, they will do something else. And you have been paid, so you've got to put up with whatever's been done. And I know that I would struggle with that, so I thought, let me just try my route and do it meaningfully. And if a traditional publisher reads my book and think, yeah, we want to do something with this, I'd more than happy welcome a dialogue, but I'll also be quite straight about what I would want out of the process as well.
I totally get that, and I completely understand why you would, because it's your work, it's your baby. You want control.
Yeah.
Now, I couldn't find an audio version of your book. Is there an audio version?
There isn't yet, and I have thought about an audio version, but everything I've looked at makes it look like such a complex thing to do.
As you were reading out the extracts, the experience was totally different from when I was reading it, and I just thought you were so great at narrating the story.
Really?
I think so. If you're going to do audio, I think you should narrate it yourself.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. It's something I have considered, and it's something I think I'd like to do. But the process itself for a self-published book looks like a bit of a hassle, and I need a studio and a number of things. But I will look into that. Thank you for that tip. I shall look into it. In the interim, on Kindle, I know that there are apps now that people can use to get audio through highlighting the words if they just want to listen in.
Yeah, but they are AI voices, and
they
don't sound like you. You've got a really good voice. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. Thank you so much. And I would love to. If someone had a studio and want me to come and record, I will come and record my book. Yeah, I think it's just sorting out that process amongst, this is not my full-time role. And I have another 2 or 3 things that I do. And because of that, I've got to fit everything into life and making sure that they all work well. But yes, I would absolutely love to read a book. I've enjoyed reading my children's books. So whenever I am doing the children's books, I read them to children and they give me feedback. And that's been really nice.
Oh, that's good. I just touched on AI, and that's very topical at the moment. And so, do you use AI in your creative process? And if so, what do you do with it?
Yes, I do. And specifically around the editing part of my book. So I edit the book myself, and then just to check grammar and just to make sure that I haven't put an A somewhere, or I ask it to have a sweep. But beyond that, no. I think your creative process should be yours, and the voice shouldn't change. You want to keep your voice. But it's great for things like checking that the grammar is written properly. And it's so easy to do. It's so easy to have a double A in places or miss out a word here and there. So I welcome AI as a new tool, but I am not sure about it throughout the full process.
Okay, I agree with you. I think as a creator, you should write your own work and own your own work, but fine to use it as a tool if you want to check something. But just to follow on from that, then what do you say to people who say that it doesn't really matter who or what created the work as long as the work is good?
Well, I mean, everyone's entitled to their opinion, and they can, if that's their thought process, no problem. However, for me, I believe that it's not satisfying nor rewarding to have a book that is not owned by you and that you haven't been able to live and breathe. I'm not sure how, some of the questions that you've asked me, they'd be quite difficult to answer without being inside of the book. Yeah, I would struggle. I would struggle with that. So what you use and how it comes out does matter. And will you be connected to your work? You won't be connected, and it just won't sound as good. And I think it might be quite generic. It'll be generic because AI is, if you've ever used AI for anything else, you recognize that it does specific things that are generic, and your book will sound like everybody else's. Who's using, not everyone else is who's using the tool in that way. In a sense, I feel like that's tool abuse, but it's for their own.
I absolutely agree with you. Now, if our listeners want to get hold of copies of your book, where can we find them?
So my book is on Amazon. So if you go to Amazon and put in "Made from This," Concia Alicia, it will come up. Can I just also add, I have seen my book in a number of other places that I didn't put, and the price has been inflated, some places more than double. That is not me. I didn't put them there, and that money is going somewhere else. So my book is only on Amazon, and that was a choice that I made. It was a deliberate choice. And if you want it at a competitive price, at the price that I've set it at, do check on Amazon. Another place you can check is my website. I have a website, www.conciaalicia, so CONCIAALICIA.com. You can find me there as well.
So if we want the money to come to you, we should purchase the book from Amazon and directly from your website.
Yes. Yeah, and my website is linked to Amazon, but you can find out more about me on my website. And Amazon KDP, I don't see anyone's details. I don't know who's purchased the book. All I get is the small percentage from it. And I love that about KDP because they do the printing and the sending the book out. So I'm not a part of that process. So of course, most of it goes to them, right? Something like 60 to 70% of it goes to them. But I don't mind because it means that I am not having to run around and post people books. And it's done through their own Amazon account as it stands now.
Now, also, if people want to connect with you, if you want them to connect with you, that is, where can we find you on the socials?
Yeah, please. I would love you to connect with me. Socials. So I have just started a YouTube only a few days ago, and it's my name, Concia Alicia, so CONCIAALCIA, on TikTok at Finding Out Things with the number 1 at the end, and on Instagram, it's Concia Albert. And the reason I have gone for Concia Albert on Instagram is because I do not want to set up another page for my books, for this book in particular. I do have a Finding Out Things Instagram page as well, so that's there, but that's specifically around my children's books. But yes, but in terms of seeing me as a whole person, Concia Albert is the page for that. You know, I speak about leadership on there, speak about my work as a political counsellor on there, as well as my books. And TikTok, I do I'm a little bit more free and a little bit more silly on there. I like that. So yeah, find me on all the platforms. I am there.
I can speak to you for ages about all these things, but we'll bring it to an end here. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to do the podcast, and I've enjoyed speaking to you and I enjoyed reading the book. So thank you.
Thank you. And I really appreciate that you have both invited me onto the podcast and read the book and given me really helpful feedback throughout this interview. So thank you so much. And I look forward to connecting with you at another time.
And thank you so much for listening to the Book and Lounge podcast. Until next time, goodbye.